Chapter 34. In letters received from America and elsewhere, I often find the following questions. Which of the instructions on meditation given by ancient Indian philosophers are regarded in the ashram as having most in common with Maharshi's teachings? Or they ask, what should be our attitude towards our own personality when we are trying to follow the path of self-knowledge? The answers which I found here at Maharshi's feet may be useful to other people for the solution of the same problems. For their sake, I give in this chapter some excerpts from my correspondence. Maharshi highly appreciates Sri Shankara's Vivekachudamani, the crest jewel of wisdom. Many Hindus regard the sage of Arunachala to be a reincarnation of the author of this treatise, which reaches the highest summit of occult philosophic conception. I have chosen from it a few verses for my daily meditation, and I quote them here. The word Brahman denotes the highest divinity, the absolute consciousness, or Para-Brahman. And Logos corresponds to the creator of the universe. The wise man in Samadhi perceives in his heart that which is eternal knowledge, pure bliss, incomparable, eternally free, actionless, as limitless as space, stainless, without distinction of subject and object, and which is all-pervading Brahman. Realize that thou art that Brahman, which is far beyond caste, worldly wisdom, family and clan, devoid of name, form, qualities and defects, beyond time, space, and objects of consciousness. Realize that thou art that Brahman, which is supreme, beyond the range of all speech, but which may be known through the eye of pure wisdom. It is pure, absolute consciousness, the eternal substance. Realize that thou art that Brahman, which is untouched by the 6 human infirmities of hunger, thirst, greed, delusion, decay, and death. This Brahman is realized in the heart of yogis in Samadhi, meditative absorption. It cannot be perceived by the senses. It is imperceptible by intellect or mind. Realize that thou art that Brahman, on which rests the world, created through ignorance. Brahman is self-sustained. It is different from relative truth and from untruth, indivisible, beyond mental representation. Realize that thou art that Brahman, which is the cessation of all differentiation, which never changes its nature, and is unmoved as a waveless ocean, eternally unconditioned and undivided. Realize that thou art that Brahman, which is the one reality, the cause of multiplicity, the cause that eliminates other causes, different from the law of cause and effect. Realize that thou art that Brahman, absolute consciousness, that reality which manifests as many through the illusions of name and form, qualities and change, but is yet unchanged, like gold in the various forms of ornaments. Realize that thou art that Brahman, which alone shines, which is beyond the logos, all-pervading, uniform, truth, consciousness, bliss, having no end, indestructible. What lofty peaks of spiritual conception, rising straight up into the realm of the infinite, where truth reigns supreme. The student of self-knowledge begins to understand that his personality is a focus or fulcrum through which flows and shines the light of life that is God. But he himself is not this focus. He must take care to maintain it in perfect purity, to enable the maximum of light to shine through it. But this should be his only care and nothing more. Herein lies the mystery of the disappearance of the ego as the result of self-realization. It brings true freedom. When the focus has fulfilled its task, it is discarded with neither pain nor regret. But this happens only when it has become a lived reality and not a theory. And that is the highest initiation. In any event, one thing is true. Only a balanced and one-pointed mind leads to the realm of truth, to samadhi. Interruptions in the state of samadhi prove that the mind is not completely subdued. It comes back to activity and evades the still imperfect control. What kind of attitude is proper in the presence of the Master? Nothing is more helpful in the presence of a great being than stillness of mind. It opens the door of our heart and enables the Master to come in. The proximity of Maharshi makes this effort of stilling the mind infinitely easier than it would be elsewhere. Often, even when people pray according to their own faiths, the result can ultimately be the same. In the presence of Bhagavan Maharshi, we are able to find intuitively by ourselves the proper attitude. The self and the visible world. An extensive explanation has been given by Maharshi himself in his gospel, so there is nothing to add. Nevertheless, as you want some physical analogy, a rough one may be quoted. Suppose a pianist is playing in gloves. You will see only the leather out of which they are made, having the shape of the hand. The ringers, as they arc, cannot be seen. An ignorant person can believe that the leather of the gloves forms an integral part of the hands of the artist. In a similar way, people who know nothing about the self are unable to see anything beyond the physical side of things. But he who sees reality knows that there is a hand which strikes the keys and plays the music, that the glove, without this living hand inside, is nothing more than a mere lifeless shell or vehicle. The inadequacy of this analogy is that in truth you can never see the hand in the glove, for then you would be the hand itself. As the Maharshi's Gospel says, to see God is to be God. You ask, what about the numerous initiation societies existing in the modern world? Let us not be misguided. If you want to give me a glass of water, you must have water to give. Unless leaders of such organizations are true masters, perfected, their teachings in books can be little better than the mental speculation of a layman. The teaching must be supported by the lives of the teachers and give us an unmistakable example of true realization. Your own self will never accept anything less. And until now, I have never seen a master running an organization or a business. Think it over and the answer will come of itself. Obstacles to the realization of the self, according to Maharshi, they are your wandering mind and perverted ways of life. Egotism and the identification of yourself with the physical body are the roots of ignorance. They prevent you from entering the path and realizing self-inquiry. Who am I? Instead, thinking I am this Mr. X of a certain age, appearance, position in society, with nationality and profession, and so on. And I am born, and I must die. All of these must go before you will find an answer to your inquiry. A yogi once said, the self of the seeker who surrenders himself to the truth is merging into the great infinite self. That is the path. But you say, I am a Christian and a believer. I am unable to meditate. I can only pray. What achievement is possible for me? Achievement is the same for all, but the ways to it can be seen differently. If you study the lives of the saints of all faiths, you will find that they are all brothers in the love and realization of God. Let our prayers be unselfish, and remember always that the Lord knows better how to rule His universe than we do. Therefore, He does not need our suggestions in the matter. Try to make perfect that which is really yours, your own consciousness. That is our only aim. I will give a beautiful example of a mystic prayer from St. Francis of Assisi. It is a very famous one. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, let me sow pardon. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, let me share joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born into eternal life. Maharshi has written in his gospel that this grace is too subtle to be described. Certainly he knows this far better than we do. Therefore, all attempts to explain in words what words cannot express are useless. Maharshi is always referring to grace as working on its proper level of spiritual reality. And yet you insist on obtaining an answer in words, which means within limitations imposed by our minds. It can be taken for granted that the attention paid by the Master to his disciple can be regarded as one of the characteristics of his relation to him. Therefore, let us be worthy of such attention by surrender. Surrender is a state of consciousness which is a condition of discipleship. When the disciple realizes that his ego personality is only a small ripple on the surface of the infinite ocean of the self, or over-self, which is the reality, he deliberately begins to turn his attention away from it and tries to merge in that all, which generally takes the form of the Master. That is why surrender to the Master is a necessary step towards the ultimate goal, for it means the realization of the true self, or God. I do not remember who described love as a universal power of mutual attraction or gravitation, acting everywhere between atoms, which represent the material veil of the universe, as well as between other different manifestations of consciousness. And perhaps there is some truth in these words, although when expressed in the world of relativity, they must necessarily be imperfect. But practically speaking, love is the only power that can support our effort to step out of conditioned relativity into reality. On the hard path to realization, any mental conception of the true goal, however lofty and sublime it may appear to us, it will prove insufficient because it is bound to disappear, together with the dissolution of our individual minds when they return to the one ocean of life. In other words, the man who is struggling on the path to realization knows how much he needs this motive power of love to overcome all obstacles. In occult literature, there are many proofs of this, and it is good to remember the well-known words of St. Paul, who said, "And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing." Only the reflection of truth itself can help us. Love is this reflection. And the highest form of love accessible to us is our love for the Master. The Master cannot come to an unloving disciple, if such a disciple could exist, just as light cannot penetrate into a room without windows. Nothing can help the pupil if he has no love. He must have a living example and an ideal which is above all doubts and imperfections. You say you know that without the Master there is no path, and you ask me, who am I now at the feet of Bhagavan Maharshi? How is this truth realized in his presence? If you come here and sit under the bamboo roof extending above Maharshi's couch, no answer would be necessary. You have some photographs of Arunachala Hill, But you will admit that it is not the same as if you could climb or see for yourself the hill of grace. The same is true of the presence of Maharshi. You will find in this journal some of my personal experiences of it. Control of the mind. Submit to me and I will strike down the mind. These words of the sage may be the best answer to your question. Anyhow, every time that I am absorbed in the thought of Bhagavan, no other unwanted idea can creep into my mind. Hence, no futile or evil thought has any access to my consciousness. The habit of harboring and feeding restless thoughts is now being replaced by the unruffled calm and peace of the mind. But this is not sufficient for vichara, or the path of inquiry of who am I, as taught by Maharshi. A complete silence or stillness of the mind is essential. I have found considerable help in long and cool meditations on the origin of the thinking process and curiosity as the source of thoughts. Then I recognize that no thought can help me or change my so-called future, and so on. We are simply duped by our mind, which suggests the idea of the necessity of thinking. This subtle lie is hard to eradicate and hard to explain, because we are practically unable to stop our thinking process at will, unless we are in a certain extent in that state of consciousness which extends beyond the mind. This higher consciousness, or mysterious samadhi, is the very aim of all seekers. As the Maharshi said, samadhi alone can reveal the truth. There are a few descriptions of the transcendent state of spiritual ecstasy called samadhi, and there are also several kinds of samadhi. Maharshi says briefly and clearly, in samadhi there is the feeling of I, or I am, and no thoughts. But no real description of this state of real being can assist us in its attainment. When samadhi comes, people are generally astonished at how false had been their mental ideas about it. These are some excerpts from letters I wrote from the ashram in answer to my friends in other parts of the world interested in true spiritual endeavor, but were unable to go to India and see the Maharshi. In his atmosphere of light and peace, I feel there is really only one great heart, of which the sage of Arunachala so often speaks. Therefore, my distant in space correspondents are in reality nearer to me now than they were when I was in their immediate physical presence.